Ever wondered what happened when knights chose kissing over killing? Can you imagine a queen risking everything for a forbidden romance? What would you sacrifice for love? Number 10. The tragic tale of Tristan and Isolde. Have you ever loved someone you absolutely shouldn't? That's exactly what happened with Tristan and Isolde, the OG star-crossed lovers who were breaking hearts way before Romeo and Juliet came along. Tristan, a knight of Cornwall, was sent to Ireland to bring back the beautiful Princess Isolde as a bride for his uncle, King Mark. Sounds like a simple task, right? Wrong? On the voyage back to Cornwall, Tristan and Isolde accidentally drank a love potion meant for Isolde and the king on their wedding night. Hoops, one sip later, and they were head over heels completely obsessed with each other. Isolde still married King Mark because royal duty doesn't just go away, but she and Tristan started a passionate affair behind the king's back. They'd sneak around the castle, meet in secret gardens, and pass love notes like medieval teenagers. Their love was so intense that they risked everything just to be together. King Mark eventually caught on, people always do, and banished Tristan. The knight tried to move on and even married another woman, also named Isolde, Isolde of the White Hands. Confusing much, but he couldn't forget his true love. In the end, Tristan was wounded by a poisoned spear and sent for the original Isolde, who had healing powers. They arranged that the ship bringing her would have white sails if she was on board, black if not. But jealous wife Isolde of the White Hands lied, telling the dying Tristan that the approaching ship had black sails when they were actually white. Believing his love had abandoned him, Tristan died of grief. When Isolde finally arrived and found him dead, she collapsed beside him and died too. Talk about putting love before duty. These two chose their feelings over absolutely everything. Loyalty to king and country, marriage vows, and eventually life itself. Number 9. Lancelot and Guinevere, the affair that destroyed Camelot. Can a single affair bring down an entire kingdom? When it comes to Lancelot and Guinevere, the answer is a dramatic yes. Lancelot was supposed to be the most loyal knight of the Round Table, King Arthur's right-hand man and bestie. Guinevere was Arthur's queen and wife. Their duty was clear: serve the king and help him build his perfect kingdom at Camelot. But then their eyes met across a crowded feast hall, and all those duties started feeling less important. Their affair began. First, Lancelot would volunteer for quests that involved protecting the queen. Then there were lingering glances during court feasts, accidental touches when passing in hallways, and finally secret meetings in the queen's chambers. All while poor Arthur was busy trying to rule a kingdom and find a magical cup. What makes this medieval soap opera so intense is that both Lancelot and Guinevere genuinely loved Arthur too. Lancelot was torn between his duty to his king and his passion for Guinevere. He'd wake up in the morning vowing to end things, then by nightfall be climbing through her window. Guinevere struggled between her royal responsibilities and her heart's desire. She'd wear Arthur's crown by day and whisper Lancelot's name by night. When their affair was finally exposed, thanks to scheming knights like Mordred, it tore Camelot apart. Knights were forced to take sides, families were divided, and ultimately, Arthur had to sentence Guinevere to death for treason. Lancelot rescued her from the pyre, killing several of his former friends in the process, and fled with her to France. With Arthur's knights divided and the king distracted by heartbreak, Mordred seized his chance to rebel. The kingdom fell into civil war. Arthur was mortally wounded, and Camelot came crashing down. All because two people couldn't choose duty over love. After Camelot fell, Guinevere became a nun, and Lancelot a hermit. They spent the rest of their lives trying to atone for putting their feelings above their responsibilities. But the damage was done, a perfect kingdom destroyed. Because the heart wants what it wants. Number 8. Abelard and Heloise, when education turns to passion. Did you know one of history's greatest philosophers was castrated for love? That's what happened to Peter Abelard, who found out the hard way that falling for your student can have painful consequences. In 12th century Paris, Peter Abelard was the rock star of philosophy, brilliant, mendacant, and full of revolutionary ideas. He was hired to tutor Heloise, the smart, beautiful niece of Canon Fulbert. Abelard moved into Fulbert's house to teach Heloise, and well, they didn't just stick to philosophy. Abelard wrote about it later. Our studies gave us the chance to be alone together. Our hands strayed more often to caresses than to books. Before long, they were having a full-blown affair. When Heloise got pregnant, they secretly married to appease her uncle, but kept it quiet because marriage would have ended Abelard's career at Notre Dame Cathedral. Heloise was fascinatingly modern in her thinking. She actually argued against marrying Abelard, saying she'd rather be his mistress than his wife if it meant he could keep advancing philosophy. Talk about putting what she saw as the greater good above social conventions. But Abelard insisted on marriage out of duty. When Heloise's uncle discovered their secret and spread rumors about the affair, Abelard sent Heloise to a convent for safety. Her uncle thought Abelard was trying to get rid of her, and took revenge by hiring men to break into Abelard's room and castrate him. Humiliated and wounded, Abelard became a monk. Heloise took vows as a nun, though she made it painfully clear in letters that she did it only because Abelard asked her to, not from religious conviction. She wrote, "I would have had no hesitation, God knows, in following you or going ahead at your bidding to the flames of hell. My soul was not in me, but in you." Their passionate letters continued for years, showing how Heloise never really accepted her religious duties over her love. Even as an abbess, she wrote about still having erotic dreams about Abelard. Meanwhile, Abelard struggled to focus on his religious duties while still clearly caring deeply for Heloise. Even after death, they couldn't be separated. When Abelard died in 1142, his body was given to Heloise to be buried at her convent. When she died 22 years later, she was buried beside him. Their remains have been moved several times, but always together, now resting in Père Lachaise Cemetery in Paris, where lovers still leave notes asking for their blessing. Number 7. Eleanor of Aquitaine and Henry II. Love turns to civil war. What happens when the most powerful couple in Europe stops being polite and starts getting real? Eleanor of Aquitaine and Henry II began as a passionate love match that defied convention, then ended up with her leading their sons in rebellion against him. Eleanor was no ordinary medieval lady. As the Duchess of Aquitaine, she controlled more French territory than the French king himself. She was already one of Europe's most eligible bachelorettes when she married King Louis VII of France at age 15. But after 15 years, a failed crusade, and just 2 daughters, Eleanor was done with Louis. She claimed they were too closely related, convenient, got an annulment, and just 8 weeks later married Henry Plantagenet, the Duke of Normandy, who was 11 years younger than her. Talk about a scandal. Eleanor abandoned her duty as Queen of France because she found Henry more attractive, more ambitious, and frankly, more fun. Their early years together were passionate. They had 8 children in 13 years, built an empire stretching from Scotland to the Pyrenees, and became the most powerful couple in Europe when Henry became King of England in 1154. But the love cooled. Henry had affairs, lots of them, and Eleanor grew resentful. She moved to her own court in Poitiers, where she established a court of love that celebrated romance, music, and chivalry, in stark contrast to Henry's more brutal, warrior-focused court. The final break came when Eleanor chose family love over queenly duty. She supported her sons in their rebellion against their father in 1173, even donning armor and riding alongside armies. For her trouble, Henry captured her and kept her under house arrest for 16 years. Talk about relationship problems? Only when Henry died did Richard I, their son, free his mother. At nearly 70, Eleanor then rode across the Alps in winter to fetch Richard's bride, helped rule England during his crusade, and even negotiated his ransom when he was captured. When Richard died, she supported her youngest son, John, despite his many flaws. Eleanor died at the impressive age of 82, having been queen of both France and England, a crusader, a prisoner, a regent, and a rebel. Throughout her life, she repeatedly made choices based on what she wanted and who she loved rather than what duty dictated, sometimes choosing romantic love, sometimes maternal love, but always following her heart over convention. Number 6. The Doomed Love of Paulo and Francesca. Did a steamy book club meeting really lead to eternal damnation? According to Dante's Inferno, that's exactly what happened to Paulo and Francesca. In 13th century Italy, Francesca da Rimini was married off to Giovanni Malatesta, an ugly, deformed, but politically important nobleman. The marriage was arranged to cement an alliance between powerful families, classic medieval politics where women were chess pieces, not players. Here's where it gets juicy. Giovanni had a handsome younger brother named Paulo. He was everything Giovanni wasn't: attractive, charming, sensitive. Francesca and Paulo started spending time together, supposedly reading romantic tales of knights and ladies, medieval Netflix and chill. One day, they were reading the story of Lancelot and Guinevere. Ironic much? When they reached the part where Lancelot and Guinevere kiss, Paulo and Francesca looked at each other. And well, one thing led to another. As Francesca later tells Dante, that day, we read, no further. Their affair continued until Giovanni caught them in the act and stabbed both Paulo and Francesca to death. According to Dante, who meets their souls in the second circle of hell, they're doomed to spend eternity, being blown about by stormy winds, just as they were swept away by passion in life. What makes their story especially tragic is that Francesca was tricked into the marriage. She thought she was marrying Paulo, who stood in as proxy during the wedding ceremony, only to discover later she was actually married to Giovanni. From the beginning, she was trapped between duty to a husband she didn't choose and love for the man she thought she was getting. Their story became so famous that composers like Tchaikovsky and Rachmaninoff wrote music about them. Painters depicted their tragic end, and sculptors carved their embrace. The tale perfectly captures the medieval conflict between arranged marriages, duty, and genuine attraction, love, showing how dangerous it could be when hearts rebelled against the social order. Number 5. Romeo and Juliet, the Feuding Families Edition. We all know Shakespeare's version, but did you know Romeo and Juliet was based on real events that happened in medieval Italy? The actual star-crossed lovers who chose passion over family duty lived in Siena in the 1300s. The real Romeo was Mariotto Mignonelli, and the real Juliet was Giannozza Saraceni. Like their fictional counterparts, they came from families locked in a bitter feud. When they fell in love, they knew their families would never approve, so they married in secret with only a friar as witness sound familiar. Soon after their wedding, Mariotto got into a fight with a prominent citizen and killed him. Medieval young men weren't great at anger management. He was sentenced to permanent exile, basically a death sentence, if he ever returned to Siena. The young couple was torn apart, with Mariotto fleeing to Alexandria, Egypt. Giannozza stayed behind, living with her family, but secretly corresponding with her husband. Then her father decided it was time for her to marry again. Desperate, she got help from the same friar who had married them. He gave her a potion to make her appear dead, planning to help her escape once she was placed in the family tomb. She'd then flee to Alexandria to reunite with Mariotto. The friar sent a messenger to explain the plan to Mariotto, but the messenger was captured by pirates seriously and never delivered the news. Meanwhile, Giannozza took the potion and was declared dead. When news of her death reached Mariotto in Alexandria, he was overcome with grief and immediately sailed back to Siena, disguising himself to avoid recognition. He broke into her tomb to see her one last time, but was caught by the cemetery guards, since returning from exile was punishable by death, and breaking into tombs didn't help his case. Mariotto was sentenced to beheading. The execution happened just before Giannozza woke up from her potion-induced sleep. When she learned what happened, she entered a convent, where she died shortly after of a broken heart. Their story spread throughout Italy, eventually reaching Luigi da Porto, who wrote it down in the early 1500s, adding the family names Montecchi and Capuletti, which Shakespeare anglicized to Montague and Capulet. The core conflict remained the same, though, young people choosing love over the duty they owed to family honor and tradition. Number 4. Guinevere and Arthur, the marriage of convenience. Before Lancelot came along, was Guinevere and Arthur's marriage a love match or a political alliance? Spoiler alert. It wasn't exactly a fairy tale romance. In most medieval versions of the Arthurian legend, Guinevere and Arthur's marriage was arranged for political advantage. Guinevere brought with her a round table and lands as dowry, helping the young king consolidate power. She fulfilled her queenly duty by looking regal, hosting feasts and supporting Arthur's vision of a just and civilized court. What's fascinating is that early Welsh tales don't portray Guinevere as unfaithful at all. She's actually kidnapped several times, and Arthur always rescues her. It's only in the later French romances that Lancelot enters the picture and the famous love triangle develops. The change in the story reflects shifting medieval attitudes about marriage and love. Earlier societies viewed marriage purely as a social contract, while later medieval culture began to romanticize love, especially through the concept of courtly love, where knights devoted themselves to usually married ladies. Even in the versions where she falls for Lancelot, Guinevere struggles with her duty. In some tales, she breaks off the affair multiple times, trying to be the queen Arthur deserves. She often expresses guilt, knowing her actions could destroy Camelot. Unlike other romantic heroines who throw caution to the wind, Guinevere appears painfully aware of the stakes. Arthur himself is often portrayed as loving Guinevere genuinely, but being too busy with kingly duties to show it. He trusts her completely, which makes her betrayal all the more heartbreaking. When he finally must condemn her for treason, he does so with a heavy heart, putting his duty as king above his feelings as a husband. The complexity of their relationship, duty-bound but not loveless, broken by betrayal but not without genuine affection, makes Guinevere and Arthur's marriage one of medieval literature's most nuanced portraits of the tension between personal happiness. Number 3. The Forbidden Passion of Heloise, Argenteuil, and Abbot Suger. Ever heard about the nun and the abbot who couldn't keep their hands off each other despite their holy vows? While the love story of Abelard and Heloise is well known, fewer people are familiar with the scandalous affair between Heloise d'Argenteuil, not the same Heloise, and Abbot Suger of Saint-Denis in the 12th century. Heloise was a brilliant scholar who became prioress of the Argenteuil convent, while Suger was one of the most powerful churchmen in France, advisor to kings and the man behind the revolutionary Gothic architecture of Saint-Denis Cathedral. Both had taken vows of celibacy. Both were committed to their religious duties. And both risked everything when they fell passionately in love. Their affair began during discussions about religious reform. Intellectual exchange turned to admiration, admiration to attraction, and soon they were meeting secretly whenever possible. As leaders of religious communities, they had to go to extraordinary lengths to keep their relationship hidden, using coded messages and trusted intermediaries. The stakes were incredibly high. If discovered, Heloise could have been walled up alive in her convent, a punishment sometimes used for unfaithful nuns, while Suger would have lost his position, power, and legacy. Yet they continued their romance for years, each torn between their love and their religious calling. When King Louis VII decided to gift the convent of Argenteuil to Suger's abbey, many saw it as Suger's attempt to keep Heloise close. However, the relationship eventually ended when Suger's royal duties and massive building projects consumed more of his time. After their affair ended, both returned fully to their religious duties. Suger completed his architectural masterpiece at Saint-Denis, revolutionizing church design throughout Europe, while Heloise went on to become one of the most respected religious women in France, known for her reforms and scholarship. Unlike many medieval tales of forbidden love, their story didn't end in tragedy or public disgrace. They managed the rare feat of eventually choosing duty without their love being discovered, though private letters found centuries later revealed their secret passion to the world. Number 2. The Knight and the Shepherdess, Sir Orfeo and Eurydice. What would you give up for love? For the medieval knight Sir Orfeo, the answer was a kingdom. In this 14th century English romance, based loosely on the classical Orpheus myth, Sir Orfeo was a king with a beautiful queen named Eurydice. One day, Eurydice fell asleep under an apple tree and was visited by the king of fairies, who told her she would have to come live in his realm. When Orfeo learned what happened, he gathered his knights to protect her, but it was useless. The fairies simply made themselves invisible, put Eurydice in a magical sleep, and whisked her away. Devastated, Orfeo made a shocking decision. He gave up his crown and kingdom to search for her. This wasn't a brief quest. Orfeo spent 10 years living as a hermit in the wilderness. He gave up his fine clothes, slept on moss, ate only berries and roots, and let his hair and beard grow wild. The once mighty king became a ragged, emaciated wanderer. His only possession, a harp that he played to soothe his grief. Medieval audiences would have been stunned by Orfeo's choice. A king's primary duty was to his realm and people. Abandoning the throne for personal reasons was almost unthinkable. Yet Orfeo valued his love for Eurydice above his royal responsibilities. Eventually, Orfeo spotted the fairy king hunting and followed him to his other worldly realm. There, among countless people who had been similarly stolen, he found Eurydice still beautiful, but in an enchanted sleep. Using his exceptional harp skills, Orfeo played so beautifully that the fairy king offered him any reward. Orfeo asked for Eurydice, and surprisingly, the fairy king honored his word. When they returned to his kingdom, Orfeo disguised himself as a minstrel to test whether his steward had remained loyal. Finding that he had, Orfeo revealed himself, reclaimed his throne with Hurus by his side, and ruled happily for many more years. Unlike many medieval tales where choosing love over duty ends in disaster, Sir Orfeo is unusual in giving the protagonists a happy ending. Perhaps the poet wanted to show that Orfeo's unwavering devotion, his willingness to sacrifice everything for love, made him worthy of eventually having both love and kingdom restored. Number 1. Marie de France's Yonec, the Lady and the Shape-Shifting Knight. Have you ever been so lonely you'd risk everything for companionship? That's what happens in Marie de France's haunting 12th century lay Yonec, where a noblewoman's desire for love leads to death, revenge, and an unexpected legacy. The tale begins with a beautiful young woman married to a jealous elderly lord who keeps her locked in a tower. He's got the duty part of marriage covered, providing her with material wealth and status, but love not so much. The lonely wife prays for a lover, and her prayers are answered when a hawk flies through her window and transforms into a handsome knight named Moldumarec. This mysterious knight explains he couldn't appear to her until she wished for him, and the two begin a passionate affair. He can visit by transforming into a bird, but only if the coast is clear. For a while, they enjoy their secret romance, with him flying in and out of her window. The wife becomes happier, healthier, and more beautiful, which naturally makes her husband suspicious. He sets a trap, placing sharp metal spikes in the window. When Moldumarec flies in for his next visit, he's mortally wounded. Bleeding profusely, he tells his lover he knew this would happen, but couldn't stay away. He also reveals she's pregnant with his child, who will grow up to avenge them both. Then he flies off to die in his own kingdom. The heartbroken wife jumps out of the tower window to follow the blood trail to Moldumarec's kingdom. There, she finds him on his deathbed. He gives her a ring that will make her husband forget everything that happened, and a sword that their son must receive when he's grown. She returns home, bears a son named Yonec, and lives a quiet life until her husband takes them to an abbey years later. At the abbey, they discover Moldumarec's tomb. The wife reveals everything to her now-grown son, gives him his father's sword, and promptly dies of grief on Moldumarec's tomb. Yonec immediately beheads his stepfather with the sword, avenging both parents before becoming lord of his father's magical kingdom. This tale perfectly captures medieval anxieties about marriage without love. The wife's affair isn't portrayed as sinful, but as natural and justified, because her husband failed to provide emotional connection. Her choices ultimately lead to her death, but also to her son's rightful inheritance and her husband's punishment, suggesting that Marie de France believed true love sometimes justified breaking social and religious rules. What would you risk for love? Would you betray a kingdom like Lancelot, abandon a crown like Orfeo, or welcome a mysterious, supernatural lover like the lady in Yonec? When your heart pulls one way and duty another, which path would you choose?